G'day everyone, this is Paul from Play New Patch. It's a beautiful winter's day here in Melbourne. So today what I thought we'd talk a little bit about was how to espalier trees, exactly how to create them, how to prune them. And so in our backyard, and hopefully you can see them in the background, we've got a few samples in the backyard, but we've got a whole heap of different espaliers at different stages. And so what we're going to do today is show you how to create them in the first place, just a standard T-shaped espalier, and give you a good idea of what the trees look like at different stages through their development. Alright guys, so we're down here in the garden. So this is just on the other side of these espalier trees is our vegetable garden. We'll show you some images of the rest of the garden in a second. But basically, when we're talking about espaliers, for those, if you're unfamiliar with what an espalier is and why you would even bother to do these things, so we've got a couple of examples here. So we've got one that's been, so both of these are plum trees, and this one's been pruned, had its winter prune, and this one hasn't yet, and you can see it's got sort of whippy growth all over the place. But basically the biggest advantage of espaliers is that you can produce quite a lot of fruit in a very small space. So what we have here, for example, and you may not be able to see it too well on the camera, but essentially we have two layers of espalier trees because the sun comes from this direction towards me. And so that means we can put two layers in very easily, and in each one of these we can get a fantastic lot of fruit. So that is the biggest advantage of having an espalier. So we use them as walls and that sort of thing in our garden to make it look beautiful, but also to get a fantastic crop. So for each one of these plums, we would get probably about 20 pounds in fruit. Okay. So what we want to do today is show you a little bit about exactly how you can create structures like this. So the ones we've got here is kind of a T-shaped espalier, which is a very easy one to do. But we'll show you some other examples of them where they're informal espaliers, things like citrus trees, which don't sort of aren't suited. Their growth habit isn't suited to this style, but this is the traditional style of espalier that you would use for plums, pears, apples, trees. They work really well. We've even got a cherry down the bottom that is also espalier, which is a little bit unusual. But generally, apple trees, pears and plums work really, really well. Okay, so basically what we want to do is get into how you create this in the first place, and how you create it in the first place, how you maintain it, how you prune it each and every year, and how you prune it at what time of the year to create the shapes that you want. So we'll start with the smallest espaliers we've got here, which have just been put in the last couple of days, and this will show you kind of where the espaliers start, and then we'll show you one that's in between, and then one that is fully developed. Okay. Okay, so we're over here when we're sitting with a couple of brand new espaliers, one just behind me and one just over here. So these trees are both pears, and they've been transferred from out the front, and they got in the way, so we've pulled them out, and we're about to start to prepare them for becoming espaliers. So you'll see that, and normally when you buy a tree like that, what you'll normally get is a much spindly sort of growth. But basically what we've done is cut the tree at approximately the height that we want our first tier to be created. So, and this is midwinter, and that's when you want to do it. And if you're buying a tree from a bare-rooted apple tree or something like that, you want to buy it just towards the end of winter. So right here, right now, we're in the middle of winter, and you can see because there's a lot of the trees have lost all their leaves. And once you cut it here, what you're trying to do when you do this first stage, which looks brutal because you might get a tree that's really, really tall, and you've got to come along and you've got to cut it and lose most of the growth. And that's okay as long as you cut above the graft union, which in this case is down about here. And so what that cutting does in winter is it encourages the tree to produce 3 shoots. Okay, and those first 3 shoots are basically going to be the shoots on either side can be bent down to this support behind it once they develop, and
main leader can be allowed to grow throughout the summer until the following winter.
So we're at an apple tree here. So this is apple tree that's approximately 3 years old. Okay, so we have tier 1, which is about a foot, 30 centimeters, depending on whether you're in metric or imperial. 30 centimeters from the ground, and then the next 30 centimeters, and then another 30 centimeters, so, or a foot between each tier. So what's happened in the first year, we planted it, just like what you saw over there, is we've cut it at exactly the height of the wire, which hopefully you can see behind all of the irises here. Okay, it's grown up, it's produced 2 branches, and those 2 branches have been bent down, so they would initially be upright growth like this. Okay, so going upward, and they'll be soft and still sappy at the end of the first season. We can fold them down, okay, and we leave the middle one growing up the middle. Okay. Now the next year we come across, it's winter again. We chop it approximately the height of the next wire. Okay, and the same thing happens the following year. And then the third year, and you'll see this particular espalier hasn't gone perfectly to plan because our leader here hasn't exactly gone up the middle. But we've got a backup plan, because what we have here is we have another branch going up, and so what I'm going to use to create the next espalier. Now the fact that it's not perfectly straight, it's not the end of the world. It still looks pretty enough, and that's okay. And so what we want to do next is we want to get that ready to produce for its growth in spring. So the first thing you want to do when you're pruning a tree like this is basically cut these leaders at the height at which you want to produce the next tier. Okay, so I've done that. Now in this particular case, because this isn't proving to be the most perfect espalier I've ever done in my life, I've got two ones here. Now I could just remove one, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to hedge my bets, and I'm going to actually cut this one at the same height as well. Now the reason I'm doing that is because if this one doesn't work out so well and this one does, I can choose and just remove the other one, and then whichever one is left becomes the leader for the next couple of tiers. Okay, now the next thing you want to do when you're pruning in winter, so this particular apple tree, is what we want to do is we want to try and create fruiting spurs all the way along the tree. So in this particular tree, I think it produced something like 20 pounds of fruit, and they had apples all the way along. So what we want to do is we want to create those sort of knobbly spurs. So it's a little bit kind of counterintuitive, perhaps, how you've been previously taught to prune things. But essentially, when I'm taking these branches back, I'm not going all the way back to the branch. What I'm doing is leaving. If I see a knobbly bit, I'm just leaving it and just tidying it up. So I'll quickly do that along this branch. Okay. And so what you're trying to do is on each and every one of them, you're trying to get fruiting spurs.
Okay, so we're down at the pear tree that's been fully pruned. So this pear tree is at least 6 or 7 years old now, and you can see it's already had its winter prune. But if we go up nice and close, you'll see the kind of pruning that we have done. So along the stem here, you can see very closely that I've left all of those little sort of chunky bits, and what we're trying to do is create things like this sort of stuff here, which is where you have your fruiting spurs. Okay, so what you're trying to do is encourage them. So if we go along, you can see it's all like that the whole way along. Okay, and you'll see again, this espalier tree is not the world's most perfect espalier tree because we have a branch missing on this side down here, down on the left side. But even so, these look absolutely fantastic in spring because you have lines of flowers across the tree, and as I said, they just look fantastic. Now to set the structure up, you'll see that I've got posts here. Now in my particular case, I'm creating walls with the espaliers, and the way that I am sort of doing that is creating posts approximately 6 feet apart and 6 feet above tall, and I have 6 layers of 6 layers of espaliers on each one of them. Okay, so basically you can get that very formal look pretty easily, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. And lastly, what we'll do is take you to a couple of examples of fruit trees that don't lend themselves to this type of T-shaped espalier. Okay, so we're over here now, and what we have is we have a few trees here that are not ideal for espalier using the traditional form of espalier. And the one we've got here is a peach. This one I think is an apricot. This one's a nectarine. And you can see that they don't have that formal sort of structured espalier shape. But however, you can still fit them into a really small space simply by pruning them. So every year we can still keep them between 2 6-foot posts. So they're only about this wide, and so a foot wide or so. And all we need to do is we just need to give it a bit of a light trim, take off all the top cutting, which we won't do in the video right now, but basically cut it back down to size. And so we're keeping our trees at the size that we can manage more easily, which is another key advantage of this. So you can pretty much espalier any type of tree you like.